to you. All right. So we have Betsy today. She's our speaker, but I am not the person who's going to introduce Betsy and run this show. It's going to be Nicole Bach. Um, First of all, welcome everybody. Thanks for making time for this event. You're investing an hour of your life today to secure your future, and you should be very, very proud of this decision that you've made. You could have done anything on a Saturday, but you're here. You should be very, very, very proud. Let me introduce Nicole. Nicole is a student success advisor at the University of Health Sciences and Pharmacy in St. Louis, where she provides guidance and resources to help students excel academically and thrive in their personal and professional endeavors. So Nicole reached out and she said, Aditi, I see that you want moderators. Can I moderate this event? And that's because she had met Betsy earlier, and she truly was so excited to moderate this event and volunteer to support the community. So I'm so happy that you're here, Nicole, and so thankful that you volunteered to moderate. So with that, thank you, Nicole, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. It is my pleasure to be with you all today and to introduce our speaker, Betsy Cohen. Betsy Cohen is the executive director of the St. Louis Mosaic Project, which is an initiative of the World Trade Center in St. Louis and the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership. Their mission is to attract and retain international people to St. Louis, not just for their skills, but also for their cultures. Betsy has written a book called You're Hired. Welcome to the USA, You're Hired. It's a guide for foreign-born job seekers. And she has worked with hundreds of international students, relocating immigrants, international executives, and other foreign-born work-authorized job seekers. And so we're so happy that she is with us today. She has an MBA from Harvard Business School, a BA in economics from Wellesley College, and I'm going to turn it over to her. Betsy, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Of course.
I am really pleased to be here with you and share what I have learned. What is so important to me is, why did I do this? Why did I write the book? And why do we have some special questions that Aditi wanted us to talk about with you today? My work with international people, and particularly with international students, has been over the past 10 years. But even in my career at Nestle, I worked with many international people and understood some of the challenges and the pressures that it takes to be an international employee with a global company, or with the goal of working in the United States for part of your career trajectory. And what happened to me, which is kind of the personal story, is during the pandemic, we were doing so much online, and I was getting many questions from international people. And I post a lot on LinkedIn, and which I'll talk about later, which is the best place to meet me and to stay in touch, as well as with other people that you might want to work with. But I got so many questions. I posted all this information, and I was told, Betsy, put it in a book. It's just hard to look at all your LinkedIn posts and understand what we really should do, because you know what we should do and what's worked and what hasn't worked. And that's what made me write the book. And I started in March of 21, and it launched in September. I wrote it really quickly because we had a new president, the vaccines were happening, international students were going to be coming again. And so I worked very hard to get this book out so it would be available with my best information. The book itself, and we're not going to talk directly about the book, but what the book does is it talks about the stages of a job search. It has many different case studies for international students, refugees, international executives being transferred, a lot of resources, and it has expert contributors. I had a dozen people from around the country who are experts to contribute to the different chapters. And in fact, the chapter on international students, I asked Global Detroit, whom I work with often, and Steve Tabachman there. They have many more international students in Michigan than we do in Missouri, and they have a very robust program like we do. And I asked them to contribute to the chapter on international students. So if you get the book, you will see that there's specific information from Global Detroit, particularly, which makes the book more valuable because it's not just my thoughts, but it also uses experts from around the country. But today, when I was talking to Aditi and we talked about what's most important to you right now, these were the three things that we thought would be most important for me to share and to have a discussion with you and to take questions about. It's an evolving quest to manage a job search. So the first question that I'll talk about is really managing your job search. How do you really manage it? Secondly, networking, and then making relationships work for you. And this is sometimes the very biggest challenge for international students for a number of reasons that we will talk about. But relationships are so important because our immigration system in the United States is very broken. And I think you know it's a very broken system. And so it is often those relationships that will allow you to overcome the hurdles of legal issues and financial issues and timing issues. But it's relationships when someone cares deeply about you that they will jump over mountains to get you hired. And in fact, I was having dinner last night with a PhD student from Ghana. And I have become friendly with him and his wife and helped him. And I go out of my way because we have a relationship to help him as he has found work and as he got a PhD offer. But it came from a relationship, not because of a resume or a one sentence connection that we had. And the third thing I'm going to talk about is how do you land your dream job with some of the interview strategies that I've seen work, and how can you be irresistible? And if we were in person, I would be talking about this in bigger detail, but we'll talk about it more, which is you can't just be good. You can't just be great. You can't just be the smartest person in your field. You have to be irresistible. And we'll talk about what does it mean to be irresistible, which is really a word that is charged with emotion. So the first question, and I have 2 slides to share with you about this, is how to manage your job search. And one of the things that is so important to understand for you is it is a very stressful time. And you just can't say that it's like starting to train for a marathon or something else that you might do. The job search as an international person is very stressful. And so you need to manage your mental health and your time and the relationships with the people close to you. So you need to have walks that you do. You have to have some downtime. Sometimes it helps if you set a time, if you're going to have a discussion with your significant other and you say, let's talk about it on Sunday. And so it doesn't permeate every part of every day, because it can become overwhelming to just have all the intricacies of the job search. Another aspect about the job search is that LinkedIn is your most valuable tool. And a lot of international students don't fully appreciate this. They haven't filled out their LinkedIn profile fully. They haven't really understood the power of it in the American job search. You need a good picture that has you smiling. You now can put a sound pronunciation of how to pronounce your name right after your name so that I will know and feel more comfortable saying your name. You can be putting up information, things you've done, commenting. And really what's very important is this idea of how do you use LinkedIn to start a relationship. So for example, I post about a lot of things that are professionally oriented. And then people might comment on it. They might send me a separate message on it. They might post. So if you are looking for a job and there's a company or an industry, you need to join the LinkedIn group for the association of that industry. You need to see who is the president of the association. If you are interested, for example, let's say in working for Bayer, which is in St. Louis, they have employee resource groups for their Asian community, for their Hispanic community, for the multicultural. You can find out who is in the employee resource groups at Bayer using LinkedIn. And when you say, okay, Bayer, St. Louis employee resource groups, you might find the person that is in their employee resource group for something that you care about or part of your own ethnicity. You can make a connection with that person and say, I'm interested. Tell me more about your work at Bayer, because you can find people. LinkedIn is a GPS for people, but it's not something to be done passively like I'm on LinkedIn, that's enough. It is your magic tool to make these relationships. So for example, if you want to connect with Nicole or with Betsy, don't just click connect. But you write something, you can personalize it and say, Betsy, you said this was interesting. I wanted to ask you more about it, or I had a thought on it. I would like to connect. If you do that, you have a very high chance that the person getting your request will accept your request. Even within a company, if you say, I'd like to ask you 2 questions about how you got promoted from this to that, they're more likely to accept the request. If it's just a name, they don't know you, they've never heard of you, they are not as likely to accept that request. But if you make it personal, you will be able to start that relationship building. Another area that is often underestimated is the alumni network of the US university. If you're attending a US university or you're attending a university internationally, you can use the internet and you can use LinkedIn to see who from your university is in the company that you're interested in. Those are people who also are very likely to want to connect with you. They'll do a Zoom coffee. I love it when someone says, let's do a Zoom coffee or a Zoom tea. And, again, it means we're going to spend 10 or 15 minutes and, I'm going to have my water, my coffee, my tea, and we're going to chat. And that's something great. But the alum network you have is very valuable, and don't forget that. One of the things that I'm often asked is, well, how do I know what companies might actually hire or sponsor me? One area is looking at people who graduated, who are the same background you are, who are in that company. Because if you're from a certain country and you know someone at Bayer is there, then you have a good idea that they are willing to sponsor, and you could ask. Another is the website, myvisajobs.com. And it's not the only answer, but you can cut and slice that by state, by city, by industry, and it tells you who has done the process of sponsoring visas. So it's one way to understand the process and get some facts to help you get started with the organizations and the companies or the hospitals or whomever, because often the healthcare networks are very big hirers of international talent, not just for doctors, but also for key staff positions, IT positions, and many others. And those medical communities do not have to go through the lottery, and that's something we'll talk about. So when you look at My Visa Jobs, it may give you some good tips on where you could look. And then, of course, selecting your major, understanding what is OPT STEM and what is not. And if you do understand this now, you think everybody does, but I talk to international students all the time who have not understood what it takes between your undergraduate in a STEM field, your graduate, and whether you'll be able to qualify for the optional practical training STEM, which gives you 1 year of the regular optional practical training, and then an additional 2 years with a bit more of a work plan for the employer, who must be an E-Verify employer, but you have a possible 3 years to work for an employer, which is much more appealing for an employer, particularly if they're going to then decide about applying to sponsor you for an H-1B visa. But I'd say once every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, from an international student who's so far along and they picked a major when they might now have picked something different. And the United States government has now added many more majors to the category that qualify for STEM, including data analytics, environmental science, sociology, metrics. So even in some of the social science fields that were not previously STEM, many of them are. And so if you have the choice between one that is not and one that is, really look hard at whether you have the capabilities to do it, because if you do, it really opens up your opportunities to get a job here and to get some work experience in the United States. So it's extremely important. And again, you wouldn't believe, but people don't always understand that. My second slide, talking about this networking relationships aspect, is that the H-1B visa does have a lottery for businesses, but there is not a lottery for certain research institutions or hospitals. This is not true for every nonprofit. People have the wrong idea sometimes that, oh, all nonprofits could sponsor me without a lottery. And the answer is that's not true. But research institutions, medical centers, hospitals, they can. And so, for example, we had a woman who was an IT person from Hungary, and she was hired by a company in St. Louis. They were not successful in getting her selected in the lottery. She applied for a position in IT at one of our medical centers, and they were able to hire her and get the H-1B for her immediately. They didn't have to go through the lottery. And so she has had now a successful career at that medical center. So that's something to keep in mind. And I know that Aditi had a EB1 visa. And this is something that is really important that you understand early in your university studies. And if you are coming here to understand, if you come from maybe a one-year master's program, how do you build the case that you should get a different kind of visa, an O visa or an EB visa, that requires that you make the case, and potentially there may be an employer who doesn't sponsor you, but they fill out the form vouching for you, that you are really a remarkable person who even potentially has published an international paper. Maybe you've been a judge for a entrepreneurship a competition. Maybe you've done something between your home country and the United States. You cannot make that happen in the last 6 months of your program. You have to think about doing that longer term. And I'm going to read you a short case study from my book that, for example, this is about Adesh, a graduate student in biosciences from India. Adesh had exceedingly unique skills and globally recognized peer review papers. He wanted to understand if a lawyer could help him get a visa based on his skills, not based on an employer. The O and the E visas have some opportunities in this way. He consulted with a lawyer and he hired one to pursue a visa based on his exceptional level of scientific ability and proven success. So, and I'm actually right now in the process of helping one of our Indian employees at one of our St. Louis companies, because he is looking to do this. And I have written a support letter for him. The head of our economic development organization, who he has met and done some economic work with, has written a letter. We've asked our mayor to write a letter, and other people in St. Louis who have met him, because he's on a young professional networking group. He has done other international work, and all of us are working together to help him build the case. So I guess my point to you is there are ways such as 30 under 30 recognition. There are regional technology awards. You have to think about that, and you can do it. And I have seen it. I have people that I've mentored around the country who've done it, but you have to think about it early. So the second topic of networking and making relationships is very important. And one of the things that I know is that the word networking, everyone hates the word networking. You say, what does networking mean? Well, it means I have to go to some meeting and it's going to be awkward and it's not fun. And networking has this bad connotation, but it's really about making relationships. And that's something that, we all want to do, is making relationships. And what I want to explain to you is what's really challenging about getting hired in the United States is that there's this triangle of what happens when someone wants to hire you. If I want to hire you at Nestle, one is, what is the company policy? What is the top level decided about whether our organization will or won't sponsor someone for a job? Second, you have HR people, the human resource people, and they may be the person who's actually at that career fair, or they may be the one that's getting your resume. And then the third part of the triangle is the hiring manager. That might be me, Betsy, in marketing. And I really want to hire you. So there's this triangle that you have to navigate. And the company doesn't really understand that they have this triangle that you have to figure out how to work through, which is too bad, but it is how it works. And one of the things that's important to understand is it's usually not the money in terms of why a company doesn't hire you. I hear that all the time, that international candidates, well, it's going to cost them more, or they're going to offer me less money in my salary because it costs them. And really, it's not that. If they want you and they want your talent, they're looking at you as a long-term investment, and several $1,000s in the beginning, a couple $1,000s, $5,000, $10,000, that is not what makes the difference. They do relocations for international executives and talent all the time. It's not the money. So get that in your mind. It's not the money. But for example, you might be working with a human resource person, and the HR people, and this is something that's a behind the scenes, knowledge, they are usually measured on something called TTF, time to fill. And that means they track every week and they go to their boss and say, how fast are you filling all the jobs that are on your list? How fast are you doing it? And your bonus is dependent on how fast you fill the jobs. So if I'm the HR person and I've got one candidate where I know that they're already work authorized, they could start working in several weeks if we like them, and another one that has this international activity and I don't quite know what I'm going to do, then it's no surprise that the HR people sometimes they just throw you out because it's going to mess up their performance review of time to fill. So that's why it's so important that you meet someone who's going to really be your champion. And that could be the hiring manager. And how do you find them? And often that hiring manager is not at a career fair. It's the HR person. So try to understand this triangle when you think about a job or a person or a company with what you're going to be able to do to break through that so that you can be successful. And people are successful all the time, but the smart ones are understanding how they manage that dynamic of this triangle and get someone who really is a champion for them. So how are you going to find somebody that loves you, where you can be irresistible and they say, I want to hire this person? It doesn't happen really on campus, and it doesn't happen at a career fair, and it doesn't happen even with a Zoom coffee, even though that's how you can start. But if you are part of an organization, you have to go to your alumni network events for your organizations. You have to show up in person. You have to, stand there and meet people and go to the alumni event. So if you are, at a university in New York and they're having an alumni event, you need to show up and meet other alums and try and find people that either based on their name or they might have their company name, look for people that you want to talk with. Another thing you can do is you can join or attend an industry association in your city. So if you are having a major in environmental science, there's probably an organization in your city for environmental scientists. So in our city, we have an engineers club, for example. And one night a month, they have an engineering fellowship dinner. And all these engineering people in our city go to this engineering dinner. And so if you are in engineering and you find the engineering association, you could probably go to that dinner. And so what happens is they might say members only. So what do? You call them and you say, I'm an international student and I have an engineering degree. Would you could I be a guest and come to your dinner? Or you say, could I volunteer and check in people that night and be a guest at your dinner? And I'm happy to volunteer and help that night. But you have to be smart and use your best strategies to get to the engineering club dinner so that you can meet real people who are engineers. When they meet you, they'll say, she is wonderful. Why don't I have her come visit my company? So we have chambers of commerce in your communities, not on the campus. For example, in our region, we have an Asian chamber of commerce. We have a Hispanic chamber of commerce. We have an African chamber of commerce. We have a Bosnian chamber of commerce. We have a new Afghan chamber of commerce. So you can easily go to the website, find out when they're having their once a month gathering, and you can show up and meet people. When you go to the Chamber of Commerce for your own ethnicity, those people are all working at companies and they're going to want to like you. They're going to want to invite you to find out about their company. So that's a great place to go. And as I mentioned earlier, often a company you're interested might have an employee resource group or a business resource group, a BRG or an ERG. And so if the company you're interested has an employee resource group for your ethnicity, then that's a great place to find someone who's going to really care about you. And so you need to find those people who are going to care about you, that you can make a relationship with. So one of the things that I recommend, you walk into a room, and I go to a lot of networking events. And when you go, you walk in and there are all these people and you think, how many hands am I going to have to shake? How many people? And again, I encourage you to make a little business card, even if you're an international student, to put your name, put your contact information, put your, engineering or humanities or social work, whatever it is, put it on a card. Because if you're meeting people, it's sometimes really helpful to have a card. But my recommendation is when you go to that event, plan to have 3 good conversations. You know, try and find 3 people and have 3 good conversations and then go, ah, I did it. I can leave now and be very happy. But if you met me and we had a really good conversation, follow up with me. Don't just say, okay, I gave out 10 business cards. I did my job. That is not going to get you anything. You know, just because you might say, oh, I handed out a bunch of cards. They got my name. And the answer is that probably won't get you any sort of a reaction or an invitation to visit. But if you had a really good call or a really good relationship with me, and then you connect with me, then there's a way that maybe you can come visit my company. So you could send me an email, you could send me a note. And another thing that I have done is follow up with something that's special, a memento. So for example, if you found out that I really like Afghan restaurants, which I'm learning about because we have many Afghan refugees right now, you might send me a link to a new Afghan restaurant that you heard about. Or if you find that we both like golf, you know, I did this once. I sent somebody a little golf tool and said, you know, this will help your game. I'm glad we met. And so you can do something that makes you stand out. You don't have to be a plain vanilla person. You can do something that's fun, engaging. I've had people drop off something at my office. I've had someone, I mean, all kinds of things. You can be creative. But my point is, that's how you become irresistible. It's not by just sending me a LinkedIn and saying, I did it, I'm done. So you can break through the clutter and be somebody very special. Another thing I talk about in the book is I know you're all amazing in your own field, but what you need to do to find a job in the United States is you have to have small talk that you can talk to Nicole about, or Addie, or me, because it's kind of like the airplane test. If we're going to sit together, what are we going to talk about? And so even if I had a marketing background, we're not going to talk about marketing for 2 hours on that flight. The question is, how can we talk about things that are going to make us bond? And these are 5 things that I suggest that you discuss and think about in advance before you go to an event. What could I talk about if I meet Nicole or Betsy? What could I talk about today? So these are the 5 that I think are the best: sports, travel, restaurants, vacations, and pets. So right now, here in the United States, it's summertime. So again, if you walk in the door thinking, I'm most likely to ask people what they're doing during their summer vacation, and that's what I'm going to like start to talk to people about, you go in with an idea of something that you can be fun and engaging on. And so you'll say, Betsy, glad to meet you. You know, it's a really hot day today. It's 100 degrees here. Are you thinking about a summer vacation? And then we start talking. And then I'll find out that maybe you made a visit to your home country, or you're coming to the United States, or what you've done. And so we start talking as people. We get to know each other. And then I find out also about your professional interests, and you find out about me. But it's really important. And so I'm going to give you a little second case study here. And this is about Agathe, who was a finance student from Luxembourg. A mid-sized financial company that did not have an immigration attorney on staff, they called me with a recommendation for an immigration lawyer because they wanted to hire this woman they met, who was an international student graduating with a degree in finance. They were drafting a new job description. They wanted advice how to create and post this specific job in a way that would appeal to their international clients. So what happens is, if you are going to get a job with a US company, often the job has to really have an international component, particularly if it's not a STEM job. So for example, a finance person, if an American can do the job, it's very hard to prove that a finance person should get an H-1B visa. But if the company writes a job description because they met you and they love you, they might create a job that involves working with their international clients, or that you have to know about international monetary issues. And they might create a job that, amazing, you end up being the very best person. So, but that comes because you formed that relationship, and they then want you because you are irresistible to them, and they really want that to happen.
Betsy, I'm just going to give you a quick
Yes.
time check.
Yes, we're good.
Yeah, okay.
The third question about landing your dream job, interview strategies, and being irresistible. think what it means for you to be irresistible. And that means you're going to have to start the networking early. I get calls all the time. Someone says, I'm going to graduate in a few months. I need to find a job. That's way too late. You need to be able to start earlier. And I saw some of the earlier questions that were submitted in advance. How early should I start? And the question is early. You need to start going to these events, meeting people, doing the activities earlier. And find a way, if there's a company you're really interested in, particularly if you're in the city where that company is, how can you get yourself in the door? And sometimes it's hard to get an internship because the company might say, I only do internships if I know I can hire you full time and we don't know about you. But you can do a shadow day. You could say, Betsy, could I shadow you for a morning? You could be part of a group that does a case study or propose a case study of a topic for a company. And you could do a coffee meeting and come to that office and say, I'd love to come to your office. I'll bring a coffee with me for you. Could we meet and have a coffee? So the question is, how do you get in the door? It is true that doing CPT and OPT will lead to job offers. Relationships lead to job offers. And it's definitely true that for many companies and employers, they don't understand sponsorship. The biggest companies, those ones that are on my visa jobs, the biggest companies do. The big consulting firms, the big banks, the big international companies, they understand it, and their HR people are very competent and know how to do it. But you may well be talking to an organization and they're like, we don't do this, we don't understand it. And so I want to give you a short reading of a third case study about what can happen. And so this is about Pierre, who was an international student from France. Pierre was graduating with a STEM degree. He was applying to jobs and wanted to know how to answer the question on the application, will you need visa sponsorship? He believed that if he answered yes, his application wouldn't move forward, but because he could work for 3 years with STEM, which he didn't need it because he's still on the F visa, maybe he should say no. So this is always a complicated question. If it's on the official application, will you need sponsorship now or in the future? The answer for most international people is going to be yes. If you have a chance to make the relationships in advance or in other ways, you can explain about how you can work for several years. And actually, in today's world, we also have people who are discussing the fact that they may work for a company in the United States, and depending on how the visa situations work out, they may end up moving to Canada or back to their home country and continuing to work for that same company. So there are many more options now, right now, post-pandemic than there were before. And so being able to understand sponsorship is something you have to understand, because often it may be on your shoulders to educate the employer, the person who wants to hire you, to call an organization, to find an immigration lawyer to help them to create the job for you or to help navigate the situation. So I wish it were more favorable and easier to get through the sponsorship dance. And then sometimes it feels overwhelming, but again, it is successful so many times. It is successful for you, but it is a dance that you have to learn how to do. You have to understand when the H-1B lotteries go in, and you have to understand that it's probably going to cost $3,000 to $7,000 for the company to get going with you, between filing fees and legal fees, and then potential other options that you can work with them. But often they don't even understand that you can stay on a student F visa for 3 years and that they don't need to do the sponsorship. You don't need to be sponsored to start because you have the ability to continue. So it's hard to understand the sponsorship process, but it is something that is learnable, and it also is being changed all the time as categories. And as we were saying earlier, the H-1B lottery, they're going to do a new drawing right now coming up to pick more people because they had some irregularities in the spring. And so keeping up on it is something that you'll have to do. So with that, I am going to tell you how you can reach me, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it back to Nicole. Best way to reach me is through LinkedIn. And there's also a website for the book, welcomeyouarehired.com. And I'm very accessible. I post, I welcome your challenges, your questions, your comments, and thoughts about how you can leverage the ideas that we've shared. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Nicole.
Thank you, Betsy. And I'm going to throw it right over to Aditi so she can share some facts with everybody.
Hi. Oh my gosh, Betsy, where were you when I was going up for?
Well, you did it. You got an E. You
I
did
mean,
this. You navigated it. You did it.
it's like, and then I keep telling students and everybody, like all 36 of you or 35 of you are on this call, you are so far ahead in the game just by being here, like so far ahead, because I didn't know the three folks that I had to navigate. Like, you just do it, right? Like, and if only I had known, um I could have navigated it so much more successfully. So you should, again, like, congratulate yourself for being here and for getting ahead of the curve. Yeah, it's no surprise that you have to work harder than most folks, but now you have a roadmap, which is always good. I do want to tell you that we have events every single week till the end of this year scheduled for you. If you want early access, we have a Slack community for immigrants. Please keep in mind that there are 2,500 immigrants in the community, but the community is meant to provide you informational support on merit-based visas such as EB1, A and B, EB2 and IW, and O1 visas. So if you want early access, this is the Slack community. And thanks to good folks on the call who keep sharing the Excel sheet. So please go ahead and fill out your information in the Excel sheet so that not only can you connect to Betsy and Nicole and me, I'm going to put all the LinkedIns in a second in the chat, but please connect with each other because you are closer to each other in the journey than anybody on this call. So please lean on each other, help each other out so that we can all win this gnarly game called immigration. So I'll pop it off to Nicole.
Thank you so much. So we're going to go ahead and start our Q&A. And what I'm going to ask everyone is to please use the raise hand feature, and you can ask Betsy one question. Don't be shy.
Yeah, there's a reaction button. You can click on that and raise.
In the reaction button, there's a raise hand. I don't see any right now, so I'm going to go ahead and read a question from the chat, if that's okay, Betsy.
Great.
Okay, so this question is, how can students search for employers that have that cap exempt status for the H-1B visa?
I don't know of a separate listing for those that are cap exempt.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do think is, again, and you can read about the cap exempt, read about the kinds of organizations. So if it's an organization doing international work, it may be able to do it. So we have an international institute that works with refugees. They are able to get cap exempt non-lottery H-1Bs, hospitals, and then certain research centers. But some research centers have to go through another university to do it. And universities also can do it. They usually at a university only do it for professors or some unusual situations for an international staffing role. They're not going to do it for, again, for a job that they can find an American to do. But if they need your international skill set, either technically for IT or to recruit international students or in a faculty position, then they will do it. So universities, research institutions, international organizations, and and then after that, you also could look at some of the people they hire using LinkedIn. You could see the people feature under LinkedIn, look and see who they've hired. And then if those people have international backgrounds, you can see that on LinkedIn and you might inquire, I'm interested, is your organization able to use the non-lottery H-1B?
Okay, thank you so much. Sudeshna, please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Betsy. It was really informative, and thanks, Nicole, for letting me speak. So the question I have for Betsy, like I am here for last 5 years, but still I know there are a lot of cultural learning that different from United States. And when I speak to people, it's always comes to my mind that I cannot express things as a native speaker would do. And also, it affects me a lot of time. It affects me that should I say this thing, because sometimes a lot of things that are you shouldn't say in different culture, but it's very common in United States. Also, in interviews, I find out that expressing myself in a way that it's like, how do I say this? Till now, I'm having this problem of expressing the thoughts. What would you suggest, like, you should do? I know I can read books and prepare myself. So how would you refer me, like I can prepare myself, to whenever I go to networking, I'm like, yeah, this is how I'm gonna start conversating, and or I'm gonna interview, I'm like, this is how I'm gonna express myself.
It's a challenge. And for example, if you go to the book website, I now have 10 tips for hiring organizations in a downloadable page, because one of the things that happens is that I try to encourage the companies that are looking to hire you, Sudesh, that they need to understand that they need to think about the unconscious bias they have against, a foreign sounding name or your accent, or that you're not as good at small talk. And that's one of the 10 tips that that a US company they need to understand that you're not going to be as easy with the small talk. But the flip of that is, if you go in with an idea of the small talk, or for example, if you research the person that you're going to meet, you can do so much learning now that if someone comes and meets with me and they haven't researched, they know they're meeting with me, they can learn a lot about me online and have some questions to ask. And I guess the other is just practice, is to go to places, not just staying within people that are part of your own culture, but make sure you are giving yourself the practice with other shared interests. That if there's a sport you like, do it with people that are not in your own ethnic group. And if there's, whether it could be a book club, it could be that you play tennis, it could be that you like to go to theater, but you need to practice, because not only is it important in the interview process, but one of the things I talk about in the book is how are you going to get promoted in the organization? And people get promoted in organizations because of their comfort and their relationships and their fit with the people above them. And again, it's not by the technical work. And that's something that a lot of international people fail on. They think if they do a really good job, they'll get promoted, and they don't, because they haven't played golf with their boss. They haven't played golf with the head of the division. That's what happens with the relationship. So getting more practice is all I can tell you to make your success better.
Thank you so much, Betsy.
Of course, you can do it. There's no doubt you can do it.
Great. Thanks again, Betsy. I don't see another hand, so I'm going to read another question from the chat. And this question is, if a person is starting a job on a cap-exempt H-1 visa, can you switch to a company that does not have cap-exempt status?
No, I'm not a lawyer, and I put that in the chat comment. So again, I am not a lawyer, so I do not know all the facts, but I do know, and one of the young men that I have mentored just switched from one company to another with his cap going through the lottery for the one business, and then he was able to switch that to another business that would have had to go through the lottery. But it's all about whether you've been approved through the lottery. So if you joined a company that did not go through the lottery because they were exempt from it, I don't think you can switch that to a company that would have to go through the lottery. So that's my suspicion, but I'm not a lawyer, so maybe someone else knows for a fact, but I don't think so. It's about whether you've been through the approval process for the corporate process.
Great. Thank you, Betsy. Please don't be shy. Betsy is so happy to answer all of your questions.
You must have some questions. Or you already know how to make this work for you, or you're not concerned at all.
Oh, great. Oh, goodness.
Yes, Sweeney.
Thank you. Yes. Bless you. Go ahead and ask your question, please.
Thank you. Just wanted
you.
to thank Aditi for organizing this. It's great. I'm a fifth year PhD student at University of Virginia, graduating this fall. I know there has been a conversation a while ago on LinkedIn about what to say when you were asked about sponsorship on the application. I just wanted to know the opinion of Betsy on what needs to be done. I know some applications do give out a description of what your status is and what you might need in the future. But just wanted to know your take on that and what would you suggest for an international student on such a question for an application?
You know, I think,
Thank you so much.
yes, the idea of this question. We all, those of us professionally in this field, we wish they said something like, can you work for the next few years without sponsorship? And, you know, and then a second question, would you need sponsorship long term? But often there's just one question about, will you need sponsorship in the future? And if you really do need to answer honestly, because that is required. But the flip of that is, that's the HR pass. And that's through the automatic tracking system. And that's whereas if you have a hiring manager that wants you, they may, again, be willing to have you work for them under your STEM for several years. And then maybe you continue your research from your home country or somewhere else. And so there might be some other avenues open, but that's something you need to talk with the organization, the person who's going to hire you, to say, let's talk about this before I have to fill out this form and discuss maybe a pathway that I could work for the organization, because you have to answer the application honestly. Because if you say no, and then it goes through, and then when they bring you in and talk, you know, they're not going to be happy with you, and you know, it's not going to go forward.
Great, thank you so much.
Sanjana, please ask your question.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Hello, Betsy. Hope you're doing well. And first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Aditi Paul for hosting such an informative session. I think I really gained a lot through this 1 hour session that I had today. So my question to Betsy is, so Betsy spoke about the unique triangle strategy that has to be used while navigating through a job search. So I would like to know as to which direction should we go, and how do we approach the right people? So whom should we generally start approaching during the start of the process? So should we directly navigate from the top? That is, should we care about the company policy? Then should we reach out to hiring managers? And then should we reach out to the HR recruiter? How does this work?
You know, I wish I could tell you that there's one path. And what I have seen is there's many different paths, and different paths have worked for different people. And I think it depends on the sophistication of the organization. If you're talking about an organization to work for that has hired international people in the past, and you can see on LinkedIn and with their faculty positions or with everyone else that their executives that they've hired international people, then it may be very clear that they will know what to do and that the regular HR process will work fine. If it's a more mid-sized or smaller organization, you know, you might, again, that you don't have any reason to believe they have ever hired international people, then you may need to have to do more education. And again, it's about finding people within that organization that will respond to you. Probably someone that's a middle level person is more likely to respond to a request LinkedIn, either at your level, you know, kind of entry, or a middle level, are more likely to respond to your questions. But, you know, if it's a company and you can't find that they've ever hired an international person, then it's a big leap to think that they're going to go through the hurdles of immigration lawyers filing, but they do. If they love you and you're irresistible, I have seen it happen, that they find that job, they make a title, they create it, and they spend the time and money to get you because you're that irresistible. I wish there were one pathway, but there isn't.
Yeah. So right now, as a graduate student, would you?
Oh, I'm so sorry, Sanjana. We're only going to have people do one question, not follow-up questions. So I'm going to go ahead and read a question from the chat. I'm sorry to interrupt. So Betsy, another question from the chat is, If you could give some suggestions for how to search for the right jobs if someone's an international student that's pursuing a master's in a non-STEM field and they just have 1 year of OPT?
Yes, if you have 1 year of OPT, what I have seen is that often it's a smaller organization, or often many nonprofits are willing to consider hiring someone for that 1 year of OPT. Again, if it's a 1 year OPT, that means it's a non-STEM field. It's also quite unlikely that that individual will be sponsored for a visa, but it does give you a chance to have a year of experience. The other thing that happens, and I talk about it in the book and on my own team, we had a woman who had been an international student from Malawi, and she was doing her OPT in marketing for 1 year for a nonprofit. We met her and we were very impressed with her, and I assumed she'd be going back to Malawi. She married an American, and that became a pathway for her to have an ongoing status to stay here, and now she works on our team full time. So many things happen in your life that may transition you from a 1 year. But what I've also seen is that maybe nonprofits, but again, this comes down to if you are going to graduate in a week or a month, and all of a sudden you've got 60 days to find that job and convince some organization to hire you in marketing or social work or whatever it might be, it's really hard to build a relationship. So you need to be thinking about that in advance and looking for somebody in your field. It could be a trade association, it could be a nonprofit, to use your skill and talk to them, because they might say, we would love to have you work for us for a year. That's what I've seen.
Thanks. Helena, please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, so thank you everyone. I had a question relating to, I just finished my bachelor's with business administration, and so that doesn't count as the STEM OPT.
Correct.
And I'm currently waiting for my OPT, but I was wondering whether, so I also enrolled in a master's program, which is STEM eligible. I'm gonna do business analytics. And so would you suggest that, because I did that as a backup plan in case I don't get a job by the time my EAD arrives and the
Right.
9 month, the 3 months come. So what do you think the best option would be? I think it would be to do my master's right away, and then I would get the 3 years, and also I could do co-ops and internships while I do
Right.
that, or a part-time. But
Yeah, but that's probably better. But you might find a nonprofit organization that would hire you to use your business skills for a year, but then you'd be maybe looking to go back next year, because they're not going to be able to sponsor you for an H-1B, because again, those positions aren't likely to be to pass the H-1B characteristics for Americans not being able to do them. So if you want to, you might be able to get work and use your business skills for a year and do it next year, your master's, or just decide you're going to do the STEM and then look to then have the 3 years and maybe be sponsored long term.
And then for relating to that job, do you think it's better if I do it as like, if I apply to contract
I'm
jobs?
so sorry. I think
I mean,
we need to
contract
be
jobs are
wrapping up.
fine. Yes. I mean, a lot of students do contract jobs, but knowing that it may be, again, something that will then mean that they're going to have to go to another step for their next part of their career.
Thank
Right.
you
Okay. Thank you
everyone
so much.
for asking your questions, and thank you, Betsy, for taking the time to
Thank
answer
you.
everybody. And yes, please reach out to Betsy via LinkedIn with more questions and keep the conversation going.
And I'm thanking Nicole and Aditi for making this possible, because it is my passion to have you be successful. Really, our country needs your skills. And my personal passion is to see that the skills that you bring, which are the best of the world, that our country gets to benefit from them in spite of a system that's so challenging. And so when you read, Aditi does so much on LinkedIn with so many resources and people, she's trying to help you greatly. And I'm trying to help you greatly, because we believe in you and we know that you have so much to offer. And that's why it's worth all the effort we make, so that you can have your best career and your best life.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. I do want to make a quick request. I know Yaswini has already asked her question, right? But Navdeep just messaged me on the chat saying that he's still in India and he is on his way to the US. And he's like, after listening to Betsy talk, I think I should start preparing for the US even before coming to the US. And I'm like,
Yes.
exactly. That is exactly what you need to do. So I would love it if we could just take his question and then wrap it up.
Perfect.
Great.
All right, go ahead, Navdeep.
Hi Aditi, hi Betsy. Thank you for
Hi.
having me. Yeah, so I'm an orthodontist by trade, and I've been practicing for 13 years. So I wanted to make a switch to medical device industry. So I was looking for some regenerative sciences or medical device development programs, 1 year programs with STEM OPD. So I really have been following you guys through, especially Aditi on LinkedIn, and now I have got a chance to see you guys here on live. So I really wanted to know what all different I can do to develop my profile so that maybe I don't even need to go to that H1B path, and I can build up my profile for an O1 or EB1 while
Yes.
I'm working. Yeah.
Well, I think there are certain cities like Minneapolis that are known for medical devices. So looking for where there are the areas that are particularly Boston, Minneapolis, maybe the Bay Area, but there are places that are known and have a cluster around medical devices. So that may also offer some good connections and pathways. But I think, for example, if there's some expertise that you can, again, try to document from your prior experience that you had certain recognition from your dental work and your orthodontic work, and
Right.
keep track of anything that you did, because that will build the case. You're going to be building a case for your excellence, so that you can wave away the traditional pathway and have a better path. But if you've maybe taught in India and you'll offer your expertise in the United States, that will be valuable. Medical devices is very important to the economy of the United States. So things that you have to think about it from the view of, does the United States really want my skills and talents, and how do I show them that I am really talented? I just have to build the case for me, and I think you will.
Right, Betsy. I get it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Welcome to the US, Navdeep. It's scary, but not that scary. But thank you again, Nicole and Betsy, for joining us today. I will be sending out this recording. I am